Hello, and welcome to Smash Fiction, the podcast where we pit two or more characters against one another in a battle of strength, or wits, or just plain fighting. Hey, stranger. You seem
and see who would win?
Oh, fuck off. Sorry. That was totally reflexive, Dan. I did not mean to say that at you.
No, it's fair. I deserve that.
Great. Please keep that.
Oh my god.
Also, you need to say the title of the episode.
Oh, yeah, this week. I knew I was forgetting something.
How long have we been doing this? How long?
Not long enough, as it always goddamn turns out.
Clearly, it's fine. I think it's Dan. Are you? No, I've screwed it up. Are you the only? No, you've screwed it up. We've all screwed it up. Okay, good.
It all happens.
Yeah,
I have never screwed up the intro.
that's
I
a
just
very
want to
good
put that
point.
out
That's
there.
a very good point.
You know what?
I've never made a mistake on this show.
Gold stars
Hey,
to both of you and like negative stars to all the rest of us. Okay, and see who would win. This week, Susannah Dean versus Tulip O'Hare. Hey, stranger. You seem a mite lost in all this vast, uncaring countryside. I bet you're tired. Tired of the road. Tired of one of your butt cheeks falling asleep while the other one is wide awake doing the Lord's work of supporting you on this drive. Tired of listening to this ad. Well, I got news for you. You don't have to keep driving. Pull off at exit 219 and park your car and your hiney at the Motel 3. Don't let the name fool you. We're 3 times as good as those other roadside motels. We've got comfy beds, working TVs, and showers with water pressure that doesn't just feel like you're being weekly spat upon by life itself. Come, stay a spell, friend. Rest from the road. Motel 3. We're always open because we're a motel. At the front desk of the Motel 3, Coram flicks off the radio, playing that stupid ad. It was 2 a.m. It probably wouldn't hurt to put on a podcast instead, right? Nah, probably not. Anything had to be better than that local radio station. Coram was about to pull up a playlist when a black woman in a wheelchair showed up looking for a room. She signs the guest book as Susannah Dean, and there's a hell of a lot of metallic clanking in her overnight bag as she makes her way to the room. Coram's about to ask if everything's okay because bags probably shouldn't sound like a bunch of metal thunks, but Susannah closes the door to her room before Coram gets the chance. Susannah, the powerful gunslinger, and a main character from Stephen King's Dark Tower series, gets comfortable on the bed and cracks open a short story before bed. She flicks to Tiptoe Through the Tulips, which opens with a young black woman walking into a motel and asking for a room. She's looking for a friend staying around these parts, and aren't you just so sweet for asking? Oh, my name's Tulip. The omniscient narrator of the story says her name is Tulip O'Hare, and she's here looking to finish a job she got back in Fort Worth to find an arms dealer and put him out of business. Susannah grimaces. Fuck omniscient narrators and fuck this Tulip girl. Susannah didn't survive Midworld and take up the life of an interdimensional arms dealer just to be taken out in the dead of night at a Motel 3. Tulip, the gun-toting scrapper from the Preacher TV series, smiles sweetly at Coram and heads down the hall. You didn't get your key, Coram calls. Susannah closes the book and takes up a position as she hears Tulip's boot tread in the hallway outside the door. Susannah silently flicks open the lock, and the door swings open. 2 women enter this motel room, but which one of them is going to make it out? I have no idea. I put equal bets on both of them, and then it was explained to me that for math reasons, that's not really how betting works. So I, Megan Bob, will be your impartial but numerically frustrated judge this week.
Man, between this episode and the last match, we are really like pushing the boundaries of narrative framework with this show.
I know.
Representing Susannah Dean are Dan Mulcairn.
Oh, Susannah, divided girl of mine.
Oh.
Fires off a round and your girl goes down 'cause tulips know John wine.
And special guest Matias Tautimes.
Hey, Dan, remember that time we were at that diner just outside Kansas City? You asked the waitress for M&M pancakes. She said, that's not on the menu. And you like it how you like it, so you said, you got M&Ms, right? You got pancakes. So you bring them to me and I'll put them in there myself. And that's what you did, one by one. That was really weird, man. I think you should see someone.
Representing
dissension in the ranks already.
Representing Tulip O'Hare are Miles Schneiderman.
Well, found Team Susannah. All that's left to do is tie him to a table, cut the freaking balls off, and over stab him in the face with a screwdriver.
And special guest from the Unspoiled podcast, Krista Contino Sambi.
No matter what happens after this, can we get French fries?
Absolutely.
In order to determine which team would go first, I took both teams skeet shooting, with whoever shot the greatest quantity of skeets going first. I misjudged my tolerance for loud noises and hid under a car immediately. But it sounded like Team Tulip was having more fun, and isn't that really what it means to win at skeet shooting? So, Team Tulip will be going first, followed by Team Susannah. Team Tulip, there's no such thing as good opening arguments. It's just opening arguments.
Shoot the women first. Hairstar advises his anti-terrorism class in the pages of the Preacher special issue One Man's War. Any female terrorist operative has had to work 10 times as hard as her male counterparts to be accepted in their organization. She will be more able, will react quicker, and will generally be more dangerous. Kill her first. Star will prove the truth of his own words at the end of the story when the top of his head is blown to pieces by the comic book version of Tulip O'Hare. But Susannah Dean also falls very much into the category of person you should have shot first but you didn't, and look at your dead ass now. Susannah is my favorite character in the Dark Tower series, and it's hard to overstate just how much she has had to overcome in order to attain her current status of utter badass. She is a master of the gun, a brilliant tactician, and an integral part of a group of heroes. And the fact that the Ruth Nega version of Tulip O'Hare is also all of those things, only better, should terrify anyone stupid enough to get in her way, even Susannah Dean. Susannah is Hellfire with gunfire, yes, that's part of the whole gunslinger deal, but don't think that Tulip can't hold her own. She has a lifetime of experience with firearms, is clearly well trained in their use, and can pull off stupid TV shit like killing 2 Nazis with 1 bullet. Unlike Susannah, who is trained only in the use of pistols, Tulip is familiar with a wide variety of ballistic weaponry, and while both women have sharpened instincts, Tulip combines those instincts with the knowledge required to, say, build her own bazooka, just to use a random example that happens in Preacher's very first episode. I would probably take Susannah in a contest of shooting cans, but it would be close, and cans don't dodge behind cover, close the distance, and kick you in the face. Susannah has a fair amount of raw strength, but she can't even approach Tulip's skills in melee combat. Tulip spends basically the entire series punching people unconscious, kicking people unconscious, breaking people's necks, and strangling people to death. And this is a story whose cast of major characters includes God, Satan, and the Angel of Death. Moreover, this fight is taking place in the cramped quarters of a motel room, a scenario that almost guarantees Tulip will close the distance. And if that happens, well, let's just say Susannah had better hope there's no corn lying around. Speaking of which, while Susannah has a great mind for tactics, Tulip has improvisation and deception on her side. Anything in her immediate vicinity has the capacity to become a weapon or become part of a weapon in her hands, and she has no qualms about playing dirty. Some of her greatest moments involve a combination of these strategies. During her bathroom fight with TC, for example, Tulip responds to his hastily constructed toilet paper roll flamethrower by grabbing a toothbrush and a pair of clippers and kicking him in the face while he's distracted by them. Oh, and she is also well-versed in tactics herself. The entire Kill Carlos scheme in the first season is Tulip's brainchild, and that includes the part where she sets an ambush for her pursuers and kills them all single-handedly, all while successfully managing a pair of elementary school-aged children. Do you know how hard it is to manage elementary school-aged children without the extra hassle of murdering a shit ton of people by yourself with improvised weapons? I think Susannah is given short shrift by the narrative of the Dark Tower series. While she might need Stephen King to bail her out with a handy Deus Ex Machina, if it wasn't for King's negligence as a writer, she might be the kind of character who could take Tulip O'Hare down in a fight. Unfortunately, Susannah does most of her cool shit in the wastelands before being largely forgotten about until it's time to be a baby factory, and she almost never has to deal with combat scenarios on her own. Tulip is part of her group, but not dependent on them, and she often operates on her own or alongside known enemy agents. When she goes off alone in season 2, and Victor sends his goons to collect her, he sends no fewer than 8 men, and they are all so scared of her that they draw their guns in a panic at the mere suggestion that she might be reaching for something. The world and the story of Preacher is more insanely fucked up and dangerous than Midworld's wildest wet dreams, and that narrative bends around and responds to the will of Tulip O'Hare. For Susannah, her story is just another obstacle for her to overcome, and tonight, it's going to end.
Tulip O'Hare has had a tough life. Her mother neglected her in lieu of John's. Her father was a felon who, from what we can tell, died in a shootout with the police after committing murder his first week out of jail. And her favorite candy as a child, Your Honor, was Necco wafers.
Oh.
What hell was Tiny Tulip in that Necco wafers and Blueberry Crunch could be the treats of choice for any child? Susannah Dean is objectively a better person. Her Odetta half was a freedom rider. She fought for equality and was treated worse than any white person wants to remember actual freedom riders were. And still, the worst Detta Walker ever did was give white boys blue balls and would-be rapists something to regret. Tulip is not a good person. Jesse's preacher father tells a young Jesse this. God himself tells Tulip this. And why would God say this to her? Well, Tulip bit off a kid's nipple for calling her trash. Tulip used getting baptized, a sacrament to be cleansed of sin, for some very steamy flirting with Jesse. Tulip punctured Elizabeth Taylor's tire with a wine opener for being a shitty tipper, even though she apparently was a really nice lady. When Tulip hears a rumor that a redneck kidnapped and maybe killed Jesse, she busts through that redneck's glass door with a plastic lawn flamingo and points a gun in his face first. Asks questions later. Tulip takes TC up on that offer to see his dingle in order to sweeten him up, though she then affixes the teeth of a dead baby gator to it when it turns out he can't tell her what she needs to know. Tulip O'Hare takes help from Hitler himself and helps him escape to benefit from his ragtag Nazi army. And though I will never forgive her for what she did to Brewski, bless his sweet bloodhound heart, she is a woman who gets things done when things have to be done to save the people she cares about. The ends justify the means for Tulip. She is a worse person than Susannah, and this is good for our argument, Your Honor, because good people are objectively worse at murdering and stealing. Roland Deschain and Jesse Custer would say the same. Tulip also knows how to handle people. She knows, through being a survivor and years in the foster system, what makes people like you. Victor's maid's name, who's taking in towels downstairs the day she gets brought in, her name is Marta. She knew which of Victor's crew was best at poker. She knew that the only way to get at Victor to get her a divorce was to get caught alone at a laundromat, then get a gun in the house, shove it in Victor's face, fight off a bunch of men, then get beat up, and then have the conversation. She cons Jody into getting close to her so she could steal his pen to get out of her cuffs. She also knows how to piss people off. She purposefully mouths off to a soulless man who has haunted her nightmares for the last few weeks, so he will throw her into a window to break the glass. Tulip is simply the best at what she does. She has an ability to take a punch that outmatches John Wick, a lead foot that outweighs Randall Memphis Rain's need for speed, a familiarity with weapons that outranks Frank Castle, a capability to turn anything into a weapon that outrivals Jason Bourne, and a leather jacket collection that outshines Britta Perry's. But most of all, she is MacGyver, Gilligan's Island's professor, and Gadget from Rescue Rangers all rolled into one. Despite what you've heard, Mythbusters ended in 2016. The summer Preacher premiered because of Priscilla Jean Henry O'Hare. Tulip to her friends and small children who help her make a homemade bazooka out of tomato paste cans, duct tape, metal army men, and their daddy's moonshine. When Jesse calls her, he needs her to tell him how to break into an armored truck. Off the top of her head, she tells him to get D batteries, phone line, burner phone, plastic Dixie cups, lawn fertilizer. No exit from Madame Boyd's? She'll shoot a hole through the floor like Celine from Underworld. She gets zapped by the Grail's Osaka soul safe? No worries, she's got her gun. Lastly, the few weapons that Tulip has used just off the top of my head besides the corn cob. A heart-shaped wedding pager wand that tells you when it's your turn at the Hindu wedding chapel to get hitched. Knives. Guns. Lots of guns. Her fists. A windshield wiper. And as said previously, the saint of killers throwing her own body to break the window on the bus to hell. Tulip sings along with Dexy Midnight Runners, but only the chorus. Tulip drives an Eggplant 72 Chevelle, and she siphons gas with the intestine of a dead man to save it from the Sano killers in kitten heels and her best Sunday dress. Tulip has Jesse so woke, when he insults her driving, he tells her she drives like a boy. Tulip comes back from the dead more times than any woman of color on Supernatural, and in 15 years, only one white woman has gotten 3 chances at life, which is kind of debatable for spoilery reasons. When a woman who hires contract killers wants her husband dead, she consistently asks Tulip 4 years to do so. The reason the man is breathing is because Tulip turns her down.
All right. Thank you, Team Tulip. Team Susannah, you must never draw until you know how many are against you. But in this case, I counted and it's 2. So go ahead and unholster.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
That's very considerate of you, Bob. Thank you.
I mean, just be fair. So go ahead and unholster your opening arguments.
Let's get something straight. Gunslingers are not normal humans. Through a combination of training, inherent skill, and a mysterious but very real connection to a force of primal goodness, unfortunately named the White, they are able to perform feats of speed and accuracy that are simply beyond what any normal human could possibly hope to achieve after a lifetime of training. Susannah is a gunslinger, able to master any weapon, even exotic and difficult weapons, almost instantly. Able to stand fearlessly against vast numbers of enemies, able to move faster than the human eye can follow, and fire off multiple perfectly aimed shots before the target realizes that she's reached for her gun. The beginning of the 3rd book, The Wastelands, shows her learning the ways of the gunslinger from Roland. And what's her first real test as a gunslinger, you might ask? Why, taking down a millennia-old cyborg bear the size of a building, of course. Her first 2 shots, intended to draw the creature's attention, hit the bear less than 2 inches apart. When the bear turns toward her and begins charging, she fires off her 3rd and final shot, severing the small radar dish on the top of the creature's head that keeps it going. She is fast, accurate, deadly, and takes down what would have been, in almost any other circumstance, a super boss monster, and does so with only 3 pulls of the trigger. She's the only one of the group to master the Oriza, deadly razor-edged throwing discs. She first picks them up in the 5th book, and after some very minimal practice, pulls off an incredibly impressive display by throwing 8 Oriza at a man-sized target. Quote, "The 8 plates ran in a perfectly straight line from the throat of the chalked figure to what would have been its upper midsection. They were all 2.5 to 3 inches apart, descending like buttons on a shirt, and she had thrown all 8 in no more than 3 seconds." We get to see her use the Orizas in full effect at the end of the 5th book, where she is part of the small group that takes on the Wolves. Now, I know this was mentioned back in the Roland vs. Vash episode, but it bears repeating. The Wolves are, literally, Doombots with lightsabers that throw exploding homing golden snitches.
Does Miles get to say it now?
Doom!
Thank you.
You don't deserve it, Mr. King.
During this fight, the only way to take out the wolves is by severing the tiny radar dish on top of their heads, which are concealed beneath the hoods of their cloaks. Every single Oriza that Susannah throws hits its target, even when she throws multiple Orizas simultaneously at different targets, whether she's aiming for the tiny radar dishes that she can't actually see, or for the tiny speeding snitches flying through the air. This last part is particularly noteworthy because we see at the end of the final book that Roland can't shoot these things down reliably. Susannah is more accurate and deadly with the Orizas than Roland Deschain is with a pistol. Oh yeah, and she did that entire fight with the wolves while fighting off a demon possession. So how's your willpower, Tulip? Speaking of willpower, there's an entire plot arc in the 2nd season of Preacher that involves Tulip having a near-death experience with the Saint of Killers and proceeds to show her, over several episodes, grappling with deep psychological scars and trauma, eventually getting to the point where she can go toe-to-toe with the Saint by the end of the season. And this is a great storyline. Her ability to get over her fear over the course of that season is remarkable, and I don't at all want to take anything away from this character arc. But Susannah? Susannah runs into intensely otherworldly terrifying things over the course of the Dark Tower saga. From the demon of the speaking ring in the Wastelands to that giant subterranean worm creature in the Dark Tower. Any of these many, many things would be life-alteringly traumatic to anyone who didn't have the indomitable, unbreakable will and absolute fearlessness of Susannah Dean. This really highlights the main difference between these two characters, and the reason that Susannah is going to win here today. The point that Tulip struggles and fights to get to is the point that Susannah starts at from the moment she first shows up.
Your Honor, I think it goes without saying that to hesitate, to misjudge a gunslinger, is to invite death. If there is anything I can say with a certainty about Tulip O'Hare, it is that in this situation, with or without information about Susannah Dean, she is going to invite that death. First off, let's take a look at her combat history. Clearly a competent fighter on par with the Preacher himself, but fighting on the same level with the Preacher is not fighting on the same level as a gunslinger. When we first see her take on a foe in the television show, she's going up against a foe roughly 30 years her senior. She promptly drops her gun and has to resort to a knife, and when that doesn't work, she falls back to biting before actually getting the upper hand. Tulip dropping important things in the middle of a fight is more or less her calling card. Her gun and her knife and her cell phone, it doesn't matter. If Tulip needs it, it'll be skittering across the floor in no time. And let us not forget that even when she has the advantage, she's prone to losing it. In the episode Victor, she gets the drop on her target, an unarmed, naked man. How does that scene end? With her being taken down by some nameless mooks the likes of which Austin Powers' father could subdue with a quip and undignified stares. But really, let's get to the heart of the matter. Tulip O'Hare is her own worst enemy. She's at the mercy of her own rage. With how often it causes her to misread a situation or misjudge a person's character, it's a wonder she's still alive. Let's just look at some of the many times her poor judgment and rage have foiled her. For one, after getting pissy at a redneck in a brothel, she proceeds to burst into the wrong room and beat the living hell out of Cassidy, who, while obviously deserving an ass whooping, was not the person she thought she was beating up before tossing him out a window. Oh, but maybe she'll have time to consider the situation and calmly come up with a plan of action, like how she busted into Donnie's house, assaulted his wife, and then threatened them both because she assumed Jesse was being held against his will. As we quickly learn, the door was unlocked, and Jesse was there voluntarily hiding out. Act of passion? Sure, it's not like she does this multiple times. It's not like she bursts into Emily's house screaming about a complete non-issue and then breaks her kid's art thing.
Is it a giraffe? I think it was a giraffe.
No one knows. No one knows.
I believe it's officially an art thing.
It's an art thing, yes.
What I'm getting at is this. Hesitation, misjudgment, and reckless actions are things that will get you killed by a gunslinger. So often on Smash Fiction, we hear mostly baseless accusations that a character's in general, yeah. Mostly baseless accusations that a character's mental state will determine success or failure. The Terminator will be out of his element. Yuri would be too distracted. Sephiroth wouldn't know what to do. It's almost always baseless supposition, but today it's very pertinent. You don't go up against a Sicilian when death is on the line, and you don't hesitate when you're up against a gunslinger that can knock golden snitches out of the air with Oriza. If Tulip doesn't know anything about Susannah, she's going to hesitate when she meets her because she's a terrible judge of character. She's completely blindsided by Carlos' sudden but inevitable betrayal. After finally convincing Jesse to come with her to kill said Carlos, she's completely flustered when he changes his mind. And we know this. We know that she thought this was going to be the time he would actually do this because she had no plan B to convince him to keep going after he started walking away. To top all that off, she sleeps with Cassidy.
Hey.
I'm just saying, it's not a great judge of character.
And I'm just saying you would too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you take that back.
Point taken.
He's my idiot Irish sidekick, thank you.
But let's say she does know what she's getting into. Sure, she's the kind of person to do terrible things that need to be done, but not without hesitation. Remember when she was nursing Cassidy back to health? All she needed to do was toss gerbils and birds through that door and not look back. What does she actually do? Plays with the damn dog for hours, telling him what a good boy he is, and for the record, he was a good boy. Aww. If there's one thing a girl growing up in a meatpacking town should know, it's that you don't name your food. If she took all day to come to terms with serving Cassidy filet of good boy, I think she'll flinch when it comes to shooting a woman with no legs.
Do you guys get disqualified if you make Bob cry?
It was such a cute dog, Bob. You have no idea.
I know. No, I've seen it. It was very sad.
Oh.
For her sake, I hope wherever this fight goes down, there's plenty of coffee cans and army men, because if there's not, the last thing she'll see is the flash of Susannah's muzzle or the glint of light off of her Oriza. It's not personal. Hell, it's not even business. It's Ka.
No.
Thank you, Team Susannah. The sound of muffled gunfire coming from down the hall has Coram nervous, but maybe it was just the wind. They turn up the volume on the playlist. Weather said it was supposed to be breezy tonight. Coram doesn't know it, but what's about to happen is a hell of a lot worse. It's time for rebuttals. Team Tulip, when it comes to advocates and their rebuttals, I threw my hands up long ago.
First off, the interesting part that you talk about what happens with Tulip's deep trauma, and her first action is her birthright action, which is violence. Tulip's initial reaction to anything is violence. And instead of having it be something that she's trained and molded into, it is her reflex. She doesn't just worry that she's shooting the right guy. She shoots a guy who doesn't have a weapon. He has a squirt bottle. So, some other people might die, but all that matters is that Susannah dies too.
That would be true if Susannah Dean was a normal person. First of all, she's operating with the sort of profile that Tulip isn't used to dealing with. Like, she's not going to be used to someone who moves in the way that Susannah does, like, not just because Susannah has her handicap, but also because Susannah's a gunslinger. And I think that Tulip is going to go in here expecting just a normal firefight and is going to be grossly unprepared for what Susannah is bringing to this.
I have to say that I'd say Saint of Killers is basically Roland Deschain, but evil.
Oh, I agree. And we see what happens when Tulip goes up against the Saint of Killers.
You mean she keeps living every time?
I want to go into this a little bit, Dan, because I kind of want to make two separate but related points and let you respond to them in between, all right? Because I want to talk about the things that Susannah faces off with during the Dark Tower series. The first thing is you talked about Shardik, the cyborg bear, who she kills by shooting his radar dish, and you talk about the wolves, the Doombots, whatever, which are just fucking robots that do nothing and don't really manage to kill anybody. You kill them by shooting the radar dish. So my question about Susannah and the bear is, it's so fucking easy to kill those robots. Why did it take her 3 shots?
Well, because the bear was facing away from her for the first 2 shots, she needed to get it to turn around so she could get a clear shot at that dish.
Okay, well,
that was why the first 2 shots.
Doesn't seem that dangerous to me. And then you were talking about the otherworldly, terrifying things. You mentioned the speaking demon, and you mentioned the horrible thing under the mountains in Book 7. So the speaking demon, yes, that's awful, but also that encounter was absolutely intentional. They were setting a trap for it. And as far as the thing under the mountain, she didn't really fight it. They just ran from it. The only other thing that Susannah really faces off in terms of like anything being supernatural in the Dark Tower series is like the demons in the Cantoi. And they have animal heads, but they die just like regular people die. So when you say that Susannah is already on the same level at the beginning as like Tulip is after she's done with her Saint of Killers arc, the fact that Susannah's opponents are so far beneath the power level of Tulip's opponents, I think kind of puts the lie to that.
She does fight a room full of vampires that are wielding lightsabers in the 7th book, though. I mean, that's a little scary. Even you have to admit, that's a little scary.
Are you talking about like the pregnancy room?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, she manages to kill a bunch of people there because they're all distracted by what's going on with Mia.
Then she kills the doctor, they all turn to kill her, and not a single one lands a hit on her.
All right, but none of them were fighters. Anyway, Krista, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that you also have no intelligent characters up against Susannah. You have a robot bear, some robot dooms, some very intentionally written as unintentional. I'm sorry, I heard something and then I just stopped.
I said doom. Sorry, guys.
Oh no, that's awesome. Please leave it in. It makes me happy every time. And then she goes against a bunch of folks who, in the Dixie Pig, if I recall correctly, which I don't like to, aren't very intelligent either. So she never really has to deal with intelligence except if you count Blaine, and that's being kind at best. Whereas you have to deal with all the different kinds of smarts that Tulip has had to put up with over the years. Everything from Jody, who is creepy, but also cunning in a horrible way, to dealing with the Grail, which, no, she doesn't win every single time, but somehow she keeps coming out ahead.
Okay, so most of the people that Tulip is able to beat are not exactly geniuses. She defeats a lot of mooks. She defeats a lot of idiot rednecks. I wouldn't say that they're that much more intelligent than, say, Shardik the Bear or the Doombots or the vast army of mutants that were at that one hotel out in the middle of the desert. I would say that their enemies are of a comparable intelligence. It's just that Susannah's are way more dangerous and way more numerous.
I mean, she beats the shit out of Laura Featherstone, who is like the best agent of a world-spanning religious fucking power organization. I just want to address the whole hesitation thing, which was a big part of Matthias's argument. I just don't think it's going to be a problem. I mean, you mentioned her hesitating to shoot Victor. He's her husband. Like, they know each other. I don't think that that's gonna be the case here. Every time she, like, hesitates, it's because she knows the people involved, and she is, like, considering the drama that she would get if she killed them. With just a simple, like, hit, I don't think there's gonna be any hesitation on her part.
Any hesitation can spell doom when there's a gunslinger involved.
But there won't be any.
I beg to differ. Like I was talking about, all she really had to do with Cassidy was toss those animals through the door. The fact that she took the entire day to tell the good boy what a good boy it was means that she was hesitating to do something that she needed to do.
Or she was doing something that was nice for a dog on their last day on Earth.
Oh, man. And on that grim note, we shall
come back to the fucking dog.
Yeah, how do we keep coming back to the worst moment in the first season?
Yeah, that's my entire well house for this, man.
Well, thank you, Team Tulip. Team Susannah, heavenly shades of night are falling. It's rebuttals time.
Miles, you were talking up how Tulip's melee combat skills, particularly her unarmed combat skills, are superior to Susannah's. And sir, allow me to tell you that wheelchairs in the 1960s were made of lead, uranium, and black hole shavings.
I mean, look.
Like, she spent years with one of those devices as her one means of, like, getting around. It gives her the strength to out-wrestle a demon in the wastelands. She is not going to have a problem going toe-to-toe, so to speak.
Look, I even said this in my opening argument. Strength is not her problem. I acknowledge that she's strong. There's no way she could do some of the things that she does in that series without being super fucking strong, and I will give you that. But being strong is different from being trained in melee combat, and as far as I know, at no point in the Dark Tower series did Susannah Dean outfight a secret agent and knock them unconscious with a single punch before dropping down to the ground to punch them some more.
It was so great.
Clearly, we're forgetting that wheelchair kata is a thing. Professor X is in a fighting game where he beats the hell out of people.
No. We have nothing to say about the fact that she is indeed handicapped. There's nothing in the text.
Yeah, cite me the page number where she takes somebody out with her wheelchair. It doesn't happen.
No. Well, that's because, now, if we look at this, you see, the samurai... Go with me here.
No, I'm going. You know what? I'm with you.
The romance of a samurai's sword only came because it was taken away.
Uh-huh.
Before the English took away the samurai's sword, it was only a thing that was there in case they could not kill someone with their bow. In fact, to draw your sword on someone was considered a mark of a poor bowman.
Oh, I see.
Consider the cherry blossom, Miles.
Yes.
So basically what you're saying is, much like class warfare, Susannah Dean, privileged as fuck, was a samurai, and Tulip O'Hare, poor as shit, was a ninja.
And usually the samurai win against the ninja because the ninja have crap for weapons.
That sounds to me like a whole other episode, buddy.
I know. But what I'm getting at here is she's a ranged fighter who doesn't shown to be pulling off these amazing chair kung fu moves because she didn't need to. Everything died before she got there.
That's fine. I'm just going to say that like we know pretty much everything about Susannah Dean's life after the end of the Dark Tower series, and it doesn't include lessons in wheelchair kata.
I wish it did. It would have been more interesting.
Awesome.
It would be so much better than that.
Do you hear this, Stephen King? These ideas are better than your shitty ones.
So, speaking of Stephen King,
oh god,
Miles, you mentioned that Susannah is saved at some point in the 7th book by some Stephen King ex machina, which is a thing that only happens when she needed to identify the fact that there was this amateur comedian who was secretly stealing Roland's vital force and, like, poisoning them. That's a rough conclusion to jump to. And, like, that was when Stephen King had to step in and, like, help her to reach this really weird conclusion. when she knows that someone is a threat, like this very scenario where someone is kicking down her door with a gun drawn, she's not going to need any help from Stephen King.
That was more a joke than anything else. But I do think that it is possible to cozy her, to swindle her, to trick her. You know what I mean? Now, like, I don't know if Tulip's going to do it by, like, pretending to be a jovial guy, but actually being a murder clown. But there are other ways to trick a person.
Excuse me, I don't think you remember the one, the only Marnie Pomegrants. You can?
That's right.
Tulip is amazing at faking whatever she needs to fake to get where she needs to go. That's how we know that she's been a helicopter pilot shooting down folks in Afghanistan for the American public so she can get out of a, 110 speeding ticket?
That's right.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. She decides she is going to be probably the most realistic HR video I've ever seen live.
For all the amazing things you're saying she did, she still fell for freaking Carlos, the man that was basically sexually harassing a poor postal worker in front of their bank that they were robbing. Managed to pull one over on her.
He drove away.
And how did she not see his sudden but inevitable betrayal?
Jesse handed him the bags, not Tulip, if I recall correctly.
This is all rich food for thought.
That sounds like a bad judge of character toward Jesse, then.
Well, I don't think either of these ladies is lucky in love, if you really think about it.
Eddie Dean's a real catch, madam.
Eddie Dean.
I mean, once he gets off the
now
stuff.
This sounds like a separate argument that we've somehow managed to wander into.
Eddie Dean versus Jesse Custer. Oh, wait.
Okay. I'm giving that one to you guys.
Yeah.
Well, regardless, thank you, Team Susannah. From the front desk, Coram turns up the volume on the speakers even more, trying to completely drown out the sounds of hand-to-hand combat and gunfire from the hallway. The comforting drone of voices washes over them. Welcome to Smash Fiction, the podcast where we pit two or more fictional characters against one another in a battle of strength, or wits, or being on Smash Fiction and see who would win. That doesn't seem right. I thought Megan Bob was hosting this episode. It can't be a new episode already.
This is so meta.
Oh no!
No, it isn't a new episode. But it is likely a very different episode. Because Ka is a wheel. And its spin always takes us back to the same place.
Show me on the
ground!
Oh no!
Tulip and Susannah are, Stephen King style, folded into the Smash Fiction continuity, and now must take up roles within the podcast itself. How do they do during matches?
Oh, God.
Do they come up with new metafictions or shine at one of them in particular? And of course, who do they play in Extraordinary League?
What?
And how does it change Extraordinary League?
Oh, God. My brain broke.
Is even happening?
The team that goes last in the opening is first up in the lightning round. So, Team Susannah, please share your thoughts.
Right. So, as listeners will know, every match that we do in Smash Fiction is kind of a mix of a few different things. You have the very logical and planned out opening arguments. You have the very chaotic and vitriolic rebuttals. And then you have the just kind of absolute bonkers off the wall lightning round, case in point. And Susannah is kind of a composite character, but we see that later on she's able to draw upon these different facets of her personality. And I think that actually weirdly makes her the ideal Smash Fiction host. Whoa. She draws upon Odetta's intense logic, her experience with attempting to convince other people who have very different worldviews from her, and her ability to construct very convincing arguments. Then when we turn into rebuttals, she draws upon Detta, who completely and utterly eviscerates her opponents verbally. I will say, rarely actually touches on the topics that are brought up in the matches, but man oh man, do the other advocates in the match feel completely demoralized after she finishes with her rebuttals. For the lightning round, like, what you want is someone who's a real creative thinker, who's able to come up with plans really quickly. Susannah, obviously, kind of being a composite between those two, has a vast array of experiences, but she can also draw upon the connection, the touch that she has with the other members of her quartet to bring in ideas that if she can't come up with any immediately, she has a lot of experience with the sorts of skills that you need for matches. She also creates a new metafiction show for us, which is called Kamalatory.
Oh, out right
Dan,
now.
get out.
Now.
Get out.
It's not even close to my show. This is my first time on, and I'm kicking you off your own goddamn podcast.
That's fair. If it makes you feel better, all I had was the title. I don't actually know what it is, and I feel like that's for the best.
Come over here so I can smack you in the face.
Yep. No jury in the land would convict you, madam.
As far as League goes, I'm sitting here thinking, would it be best to go with someone completely new? But then I start thinking about the characters we've had in League, and specifically conditions of those characters, and there's one that seemed to slot into perfectly. I feel like she's going to be replacing Kit as Stitch.
Oh my
but
god!
Specifically, Stitch with the Venom symbiote.
What?
Because every action is going to be Stitch contemplating something as Odetta, with Detta inside saying, "Let's eat its face."
Wow.
Oh.
I know it wasn't always brought to its full potential there, but I think someone like Detta and Odetta playing both halves of this character is going to give a revamped Venom Stitch a completely new life.
Oh, nightmares. I love it. Thank you. And Team Tulip, what have you got for us?
There are a few reasons why Tulip would be really good at Smash Fiction matches, and the first reason would be that she would have the contact information for whoever's the judge and would spend the whole time sending them threatening text unless she wins.
Well,
man, how have I not tried that strategy yet?
Right?
Bob,
yes.
blink 3 times if you're being threatened.
I'm blinking so much you can't see. No, I'm fine.
She would do it with emojis. Because she's so good at improvisation, she would be like super creative with the emojis, using like different pictures to make like words that don't exist in emoji form.
Ooh.
Yeah. Eat that, Susannah.
Well, I mean, I've been showed.
Krista, you had another idea for why she would get at matches, right?
Well, she'd be really good at emojis compared to Susannah because she's not from 1960-something.
Right. Well, that was the other thing, is that Susannah would actually suck at Smash Fiction because she doesn't have any of the references that we use on Smash Fiction, and she doesn't know how to use the internet to look it up.
If it isn't blatantly apparent from the 2 seconds of watching Tulip's character talk to anyone with any knowledge whatsoever, she has massive imposter syndrome. And what does massive imposter syndrome make you do? Over-prepare. Know everything so cold that perhaps on your first time on a show, you rewatch everything you've ever seen to make sure, and then listen to other podcasts about the things that you were watching to make sure that you didn't miss anything just because you were watching because you don't trust what you watched, that you actually know what you watched, because no one would ever do anything like that.
Huh, interesting.
No, that came out of nowhere. I
don't really think Tulip would be that into the metafictions because she doesn't have a whole lot of like imagination for the whole fiction thing, but when it comes to Shipwrecked, she would rule. That said, I think the biggest impact that Tulip would have would be in Extraordinary League, where Chris and I determined that she would be playing Maeve from Westworld.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
And
what's
by
Maeve?
playing Maeve from Westworld, she would be able to operate within the game with the knowledge that it's a game.
Ah!
How would that change things, Dan?
I don't know, man. I haven't had Deadpool in my game yet, so I can't tell you.
She could be Maeve in the Deadpool suit.
Miles knows more than you guys do how much that would just blow my mind right now. I am literally rocking back and forth in excitement in my chair.
I'm just saying, like, I feel like that would give you some cause to think about whether or not it was more powerful than Superman. I don't think she'd be disqualified, especially after you got all her threatening texts, but I think you would think about it.
I guess I should probably go now because I feel like you guys have transitioned into the judge's recess without me, but that's fine. So I want to just say Thank you for all of that. And now I shall go to my blanket fort to consider everything that has been put before me.
Are there cookies?
There might be cookies later, so
Nice.
I will return with a decision and perhaps cookies.
I really just need to get this out there into the world. Whenever I watch something, like I somehow affect whatever the speech patterns are from said media, like Jay and Silent Bob, my vocabulary goes up, though it becomes super vulgar. And by binging just as much Preacher as I could, I was trying to figure out as I was talking to my wife, why does my own voice sound slightly off to me? Everything just sounds a little strange. I was like, son of a bitch, I sound like someone out of Preacher.
Yeah, Kit does the same thing with accents. She is particularly vulnerable to Southern and Texan accents, although anytime we hang out with Meg and Bob's husband, Neil, Kit has to physically fight back the urge to accidentally imitate his Irish accent.
Oh my god, Kit, if you're listening to this, don't hold back, dude. It's too much fun.
Do it.
It's way too much fun.
That Texan accent is so subtle to someone from Arizona because it's almost making it into that kind of Midwestern, more neutral thing, but it's just enough that all of a sudden you're like, why am I suddenly thinking about propane?
I mean, and propane accessories. Preacher is a nutty fucking show, man.
Yeah, it really is. I was very surprised with the way that particular adaptation went, I have to say.
Yeah, me too, because you've read the comic, right?
Yes.
I don't hate it. I don't hate how much it diverges, but man, it is just never what I'm expecting.
I actually watched the Preacher show first, and then I read the comics, and I think that really clarified how very 90s white feminism is how I described it to Rashawn.
Oh, yeah. I think that's entirely accurate.
She busted. I was like, this is Chasing Amy, but in a comic about boys.
Preacher is so weird because it's super dated. Like, it's very much a 90s comic. And it's this fucking Irish guy writing about what America means.
It's so bizarre.
And it's like, as an American, you just want to be like, I mean, kinda, buddy, but I think you might be missing the point on a few things.
It's kind of American Gods in that way, isn't it? It's like this like British person who is in a lot of ways both enamored of and slightly critical of the US and like uses this sort of supernatural tale as a giant parable for the American experience, you know? It's really interesting.
And then we have all the actors on Preacher who are all...
none of whom are American or doing their own native accents.
Not even close. I love that the only Irish actor on there is pretending to be Texan, but we have an Irish character on there.
Yeah, he's not actually Irish.
Yeah.
There was a part when I was watching where Tulip quotes something that Cassidy had said, and I so wish they had Ruth Negga do her impression of an American doing an Irish accent.
That would have been great.
That would have been perfect. That would have instant Emmys for that show as far as I'm concerned if they had done that.
She's an international treasure.
She's fucking delightful.
I came into both of these completely blind, and I have to say I am far more motivated to finish Preacher than I am to finish just listening to the audiobook.
That is entirely the right decision to make, sir.
The audiobooks, stop at book 4 and then read the short stories and then pretend it never happened. The rest of it just never happened.
Can I just skip to pretend it never happened?
Well, I mean, books 2 and 3 are fucking fantastic.
Book 4 is what I started on in 1998, I figured out.
Wow. When we did the Roland Vash match, I had definitely finished the series, but I don't think Natasha and I were done covering it on Unspoiled. So I was still like very much steeped in like right in the middle of Dark Tower just like all the time. And it's so hard to get back into it. Like after you finish it, you just want to break for years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never read it again after I read it the first time.
It's interesting because like I went back to some of the books to like look up, you know, certain scenes and remind myself of some of Susannah's capabilities. And the writing from moment to moment is often so good. Like Stephen King really knows how to just like craft a well-written sentence or like capture a really unique feeling in a way that makes it feel really visceral. It almost seduces you into like wanting to go further. But then I just I can't do it with Dark Tower
He's
again, man.
He's a good writer.
He's a great writer. He's just not a very good like story planner.
He makes some choices that you wish he hadn't made.
Yes, absolutely.
Most of them involving Susannah, unfortunately.
And, like, it's weird that we're saying that about Stephen King and the Dark Tower series when the other part of this match made a choice to make Hitler a major character on your show.
Yeah, boy, you want to talk about some weird choices the TV show made that the comics did not.
Yeah.
Oh my god, yeah. Well, and I do have to say I was a little surprised you guys didn't point out, although I can kind of also understand it, that one of the things that Susannah wrestles is while she's making sure that the demon, although is initially trying to rape her, doesn't stop having sex with her.
Man, I did not want to talk about that at all.
I don't blame you. I was like, can this please not come up with rebuttals? Please.
Sorry.
All I said was she wrestled a demon, and I was perfectly content with leaving it there.
Because I was like, but she had to use her leg muscles, and those were really strong. Like, she had shit going on more than just her upper body strength. And
I still don't regret not talking about it.
Yeah, I would rather go back to keep talking about the dead dog.
Here we go. I want to say, first of all, that because I am the judge, and also because today I am like Den Mother, you're all winners. And I hate that I have to ever judge anything, because it is actually, much to my frustration, has nothing to do with how good any of you are, and is purely about really the characters sometimes. And in this case, I think Susannah has more even performance from what I heard. I'm not going to say that necessarily makes her stronger overall, and I would not say that she would win every single time if you were to have this, if it was like the Angels fight from Preacher, and this fight were to play out multiple times. I do not think that it is a case that Susannah would win every time. I think she would win slightly more times than Tulip, and that is why I'm giving it to Susannah.
Bob, you ended my streak. This is my very first win.
Congratulations!
Yay!
Aw, congrats.
A big thank you to Dan for convincing me to go through with this, because I was like inches away from being like, I don't know anything about these people and I have very little time to spare for this. Maybe next time.
Miles and Krista, you guys are both just excellent.
So
Always.
funny.
Very much so.
I think
funny.
Krista and I agree on the fact that Susannah Dean fucking rules, and we're totally cool with her winning.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh yeah.
Like,
I'm happy with either one in this particular case. I love these characters.
Do you guys think they'd be friends in real life?
Oh,
No.
totally.
No.
No, you don't think so?
Not even a little.
I have trouble seeing them being friends with most anyone.
If Tulip found Susannah needing help, then they could be friends. But I think that Tulip would always feel insecure and inferior to Susannah. Always.
Interesting.
I think if they met at a bar, got drunk, got into a fist fight, and then woke up in a jail cell the next morning, they would be inseparable. That's my analysis.
Now, does the fist fight include several drunken racist rednecks?
Absolutely.
Yeah. See, all they need to do is be pulled over by the same racist cop at the same time.
Yeah.
That's all they
that'll
need.
do it. There's your meet cute.
Aww.
Be not afraid.
Aww.
I said, be not afraid.
I'm not afraid.
Yeah, but you said it in a scary way.
In an angel way. Why is everyone so afraid?
Because angels are scary.
Yeah, they are scary. Time for Kid Thanks. Thank you to Jake Wars 5, The Jake Strikes Back.
Oh.
Tyler, Sid Rabbit, The Tuning Japanese Podcast, Vladimir Duran, Cosplay Fiend, Sean Boyd, Earth Mofo, Sandwich Surplus, Jada John, Florian, Daniel the Fryman, Matias Tautimez, Viola Sanderlin, Three Owls in a Trench Coat, and the Unpacking the Power of Power Pack podcast. Ooh, I like that one. A lot of plosives. Over to Tumbles. Thank you to Sid Rabbit Blog and Not Very Bright Raven, my favorite kind of raven. Changing Shades and Ink the Cryptid. And on Facebook, thank you to Jeff Polier, Adam Mayo, Robert Ramsey, Jeffrey Ketchum, and Viola Sanderlin again. As always, I'm sorry if I missed you and I didn't thank you.
Well, one person that we definitely thanked and wish to continue thanking in this episode was Coram, who is, of course, the overnight clerk at the Motel 3. Big podcast fan. And when Coram is not working the front desk, Coram supports us on Patreon, which is how Coram got into our storyline. And also access to our bonus content, all sorts of good stuff over at patreon.com/Smash Fiction Podcast. We also did, of course, want to thank both Matthias and Krista for coming on the show and just being amazing. You guys are great. We would love to have both or either of you back on the show at some point. And if you have anything to plug that you want our listeners to know about, please share that at this point.
I'm part of the Unspoiled Network, as is Miles. I cover 4 shows off and on. Right now, finishing up Lost. So I finally get to know how that ends at some point, because in Unspoiled, one person knows what's going on and the other person doesn't know what the fuck is going on.
Was it the polar bear the whole time?
God damn it, I don't know. I've got like 3 episodes left.
It better be. It better be the polar bear.
It's a good polar bear. We're also covering The Punisher. We've had some pretty good interviews, including an interview with a combat vet about PTSD and how that actually works within the show. We also cover The Vampire Diaries, and we finished Band of Brothers last year.
Everybody listening to this really should go over to Unspoiled and become a patron of that show, especially in light of recent events, because I believe the lead seems pretty insurmountable in the poll for the next thing that Natasha and I are going to cover for patrons only. So,
which is what, Miles?
If y'all want to hear me and Natasha cover chapter by chapter with me as the unspoiled one, The Twilight Saga.
Yes!
Yes. You are in for a treat.
You should go over to the Unspoiled Patreon and become a member. Give her some money, because that's going to be fucking great.
So we're going to be seeing Edward Cullen in a future match, I take it?
Oh, you better believe it.
Okay, Miles, I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to want to like Jacob. Don't, because they ruined it.
Don't tell me anything.
That's
don't
it.
tell me anything.
All right.
Not allowed to.
Just protect your feelings.
No, I refuse. My feelings are exposed at all times.
Matthias, how about you?
As always, I like to plug the book that I'm getting out there, The Paladin. You can check out excerpts on my website, Matthias Tautimus, exactly like it sounds, .com. While you're there, you can check out, I do game reviews. I recently did a half of a Carmen Sandiego, the new Netflix show review. Hopefully the second half will be up by the time this goes live. People apparently seem to like my latest little mini Gotham review.
Yes.
And I've got some, thank you, Bob.
So good.
And I've got some short story starters up there that I'd love to get eyes on. I would really love to plug that we have a Extraordinary League fan Discord server where we're running 2 groups. Basically, it's fan fiction of fan fiction, I guess. Just because everyone in the fan faction loves Extraordinary League so much that when I floated the idea, because I had done a few games in person with friends of mine, I floated the idea, a bunch of people jumped on it, and so we've got 2 sessions going weekly.
Do you want to say real quick where people can find that Discord server if they're interested?
That Discord server, if you go to the Smash Fiction fan faction, there is a link there. I don't know what the link is, like, off the top of my head. But if you go by the fan faction on Facebook, I can give you an invite, or I'm sure any of the other people, anyone that wants to go by can just go by the Facebook group, and we can get you hooked up with an invite. If there's room, I do have one minor announcement, if that's okay. Hopefully within a month or so, my wife and I will be moving to China.
Holy crap! That's amazing!
Wow. I can't wait to ask you all about what it's like there.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, we've been doing a crap ton of research, and we're going to be teaching English over there for probably about 2 years, we're guessing. So this is the first real major announcement of it. We feel confident in announcing it here because we know that her family does not listen to this podcast.
So this is you just putting this message in a bottle and throwing it in an ocean is what it is.
Oh yeah, pretty much. I just wanted, to somehow announce it, and she wants to kind of... She's debating about whether she wants to tell her family, at the airport or whether she's on the plane. So,
oh my God.
I love that we are here just to salve your conscience about sharing this news. We're just there. We're just receiving this. I'm here for it. Congratulations.
Well, congratulations, man. It sounds like quite an adventure you guys are going on.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully it's going to start to a grand adventure. There are ways to get around the Great Firewall, so hopefully you'll still see me online and...
Yay!
Fair.
The blog may not get updated quite as often, but I'll still be doing my best to participate whenever and wherever I can.
We'll find you.
Krista, Matthias, again, thank you guys so much. You both did exceptionally well, and we enjoyed having you on the show immensely.
Yeah, you guys were great.
It was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Smash Fiction. We hope you enjoyed it. Next week, the 38th episode of Extraordinary League, and after that, She-Ra versus Xena versus Cassandra Pentagast.
Smash Fiction is produced by Miles Schneiderman and production assistant Sharon Schneiderman, with logo design by Claire Mulcairn.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod at Incompetech.com for our theme song, Hitman.
You can find us on Twitter at SmashFic Podcast and search for the Smash Fiction Podcast on Facebook, Tumblr, and YouTube.
Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or your podcatcher of choice, and if you leave us a good review, we shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Smash Fiction is made possible thanks to our supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/smashfictionpodcast. Please consider donating as little as $1 each month. It helps us keep the show going. And we have great rewards and extra content for those who help us out.
If you have any suggestions, feedback, or other contributions, send them to us at smashfictionpodcast@gmail.com and help us continue the fight.
I just realized that we have Clint Eastwood versus John Wayne.
Oh, wow.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I don't like this match anymore.
I feel icky. Let's bring it back to the ladies.
Yeah.
So is the lightning round just us yelling at a chair? Is that what it is?
Oh my god, that's gonna be my next one. I'll tell you that much right now.
Oh my god.
I've done the points that I wanted to make.
Okay.
Matthias, if you have any, feel free.
I mean, they're not going to be on topic, but
I just want to say that I'm not necessarily here for On Topic, so if you would like to say one, I cannot promise that it will be in the episode, but I can
Consider
promise.
the colonial American